Alrighty, well, it is 9:30 here in Seattle, and we have a very full agenda today, so we can go ahead and get started. My name is Sydney. I'm one of the PMs on the PowerShell team, and welcome to our August 2022 community call. Thank you for joining us here today. A few reminders as we get started. This is meant to be an interactive session, so definitely feel free to use the chat to ask questions. Also feel free to use the raise hands feature if you'd like to come off mute and ask a question or provide feedback on something. We're very excited to have you here. I also posted in the chat a link to an issue in our RFC repo. Each month we open an issue in this repo, which gives folks the opportunity to see the agenda as we build it and preload demos, topics, and questions. We always welcome community agenda items as well, or community demos. And in fact, we have Mike giving some community updates today. So feel free to continue to use that issue to ask questions today. Also, feel free to use the chat to ask questions today. We should have some time at the end of our agenda for open Q&A as well. And just a final reminder that this session is recorded and will be posted to YouTube later. So with that, we can move to our first agenda item, which is Steve talking about new team member, PS 7.3 roadmap, and 7.4 preview plans.
All right, so why don't we just start off with introducing our new team member who's on camera, Alyssa. Alyssa, why don't you just give a few brief words about what you'll be working on with the team?
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I'll be working on PowerShell Get and PowerShell Gallery.
Yep, so she just joined out of university, so we now have another team member focusing on, hopefully we'll get more progress on PowerShell Get and also focusing on some stability things on the PowerShell Gallery. So thank you for joining the team. Regarding 7.3, so I'm going to shift here. So we are getting towards the end here, even though we're not quite at the end of the calendar year. So our expectation is that we'll have a release candidate next month, September. So that means that we are now much more conservative on the changes that we'll be taking. All right. In fact, recently we had a nice PR from actually someone at Microsoft to address something, but through a lot of debate, it turns out that we're going to defer that and not take it in 7.3. We'll take it in 7.4, give it more bake time to see if there's side effects that we're aware of. So don't be surprised if some of the PRs that are submitted either by the team or from the community don't get taken into 7.3. We're really trying to reduce any risk of regression and introducing instability problems. But let's talk about 7.4 real quick. So what that means is that we should hopefully start having 7.4 previews towards the end of this calendar year. I think one of the challenges we have on the team is now that we have multiple concurrent releases. Remember that even though 7.1 is out of support, 7.0, I believe, is still in support till December, I want to say. I'd have to check.
Yes, December.
Yeah, so that means that if there's any kind of fixes we got to take from .NET, for example, or even for fixes from ourselves that we need to backport, we would have a 7.0, a 7.2, a 7.3. And so if we introduce a 7.4 preview, that's like 4 releases in a month, and that's just a lot of work. So I think the plan that we have going forward is if we have in a month, let's see, how do I want to put this? We're going to do max 3 releases a month. Okay, I'll put it that way. So if we don't have a 7.0 or maybe like we don't have a 7.2 because there's no servicing updates, then that means that we will have opportunity to have a 7.4 preview. But if we already have the team focus on a 7.0, 7.2, and 7.3 release, then we're going to defer a 7.4 preview till the next opportunity. All right, so we're going to do at most 3 releases a month until we can. Yeah, we've been working on towards reducing the cost of that, but it's hard for older releases. But we've been making changes in 7.2 and 7.3, so hopefully over time it'll be much less taxing on the team to get multiple concurrent releases out. The other thing I want to bring up, I almost forgot, is that, or actually maybe I'll let Aditya talk to it in terms of the dailies.
So soon we'll be moving the master branch on GitHub for PowerShell to sync with, consume .NET SDK's master branch. So it's not going to be exactly RC1 builds, but whatever the master branch is. since RC1 builds are not available early. But for the release for PowerShell RC1, it will be on the build that .NET 7 RC1 is. But we'll start getting those changes in so that in preparation for the 7.4 previews, as well as the daily builds will be a good validation for any new changes coming in from .NET which are affecting PowerShell. So I would ask everyone to try and use daily builds soon and give us feedback, which would be useful, very useful for any breaking changes that we are seeing in 7.3.
So let me add a little bit more context there. So .NET is also moving towards an RC, and one of the big issues we found early and late is that they had some changes they took for ready to run, which is how we get like pre-compiled binaries for improving startup performance and runtime performance. And there were some regressions that we found that they were not able to fix as quickly as we wanted. So then that means that we had to wait a month to pick up those fixes, and then we found some additional issues in ready to run. So because of that, we've actually been not shipping. I don't know if anyone's really noticed, but we have not been shipping ready to run binaries for the 7.3 previews. So that means that startup is actually slower. Like what I measured on my system is like without ready to run, meaning just MSIL, intermediate language, it was about a second to start up. But with ready to run, it's like 100 milliseconds, about 10x difference. But I'm actually kind of surprised that no one complained about it so far, which is maybe a good sign. People didn't notice. Once it started up, it's not as a big of impact that people would notice anyways. But the point here is we have not been producing ready to run. And so the concern is there may be other issues in that space because they've been making a lot of improvements in that space, .NET team has, that we may not have found it yet. So that's why we want to give an opportunity for people to kind of like help us by running some of the daily builds going forward after, or I'll probably tweet or something once that's ready. So that hopefully we can find issues before we have the next RC release. So I think that covers what I wanted to cover on that one.
Awesome. Thank you both for the updates. I'm very excited to have Alyssa be joining the team as well. Next up, I believe we have Andy talking about some of the VS Code updates and regression tests.
Hi there. Yeah, did not realize I was so early in the agenda, but I can go ahead and pull it up and get my screen shared. Really, I'm just going to be sharing kind of the document that we've been using to follow our progress on the regression tests. I think we were talking about this last month as well. We're close to wrapping up. We've actually hit like all the low-hanging fruit as much as we can. There's still one big area of testing that I'd really like to get us to be able to cover, and that's around synchronization of like the state of the debugger between like the PowerShell debugger underneath the covers and the VS Code debugger itself. But we've made a lot of progress, and I'm just gonna show it as soon as I can get this screen shared. Joining device on other computer, adding device. One more second here. Here we go. Okay, so I'm probably not going to demo any of these because they are indeed just like regression tests. But for anyone like following along, we had originally this issue, all of these were open. We kind of went back through the rewrite and went, what was everything that we broke? And how do we make sure we don't break it again? A couple recent ones that we added that I just want to call out because a lot of community members pointed them out and had us fix them. For instance, was debugger breaking in an untitled script. We actually chose to like turn that off during the preview because we didn't see a good way to go about having it work. Once we had enough feedback saying, no, we need that, even though it's kind of hacky, not only did we get it back in, but we at the time didn't have a way to test it properly. But we actually have a whole unit test now covering that as a regression. So we'll know if we accidentally break debugging in untitled scripts before. This was quite an interesting one. If I don't know how much you guys actually want to see some C# code, but like we have a very advanced little script here that actually mocks what you see when you're in VS Code. You know you have an untitled one like little window open, and you try to go send a piece of script through it and actually want it to break on the debugger. our end-to-end test completely covers that. From like PowerShell editor services perspective, we actually send that through, make sure everything is handled. This goes through the same code path. Trust me, I stepped through it just to triple check myself. And yeah, our debugger stops and we'll know if we break that. We should continue to have the ability to support breakpoints and untitled scripts when you're doing that in VS Code. So I really liked that one. And we also had there were two more that I wanted to call out. I'm looking for one. I mean, you can see this giant list. There's a lot here. Recent one though, it was dot sourcing operator. So this was an accidental regression that happened during the rewrite. We just, we had this really long-lived feature branch, like 6 months going on. At some point during those changes, we changed from doing a dot source of the script that you were executing to an ampersand call, which seems like a small little change, but yeah, we had enough people say, hey, that did not work. Like that broke so many different flows. We did get it fixed, but again, we didn't have a great way to test it at the time. This is a much smaller test, but yeah, we now have an end-to-end regression test for that as well. So I just want you to know that even if you're not seeing a lot of new features come out of the extension right now, we're really working hard on making sure that what you asked for previously and we got fixed will stay that way. This focus on quality is really important to me and to Microsoft as a whole and like our team. But I did not want us to be breaking these 2 years down the line when we do, who knows, yet another rewrite. Like, right, we need to keep the behavior as consistent as it is, and so behind the scenes work is happening. Please trust us. See the code, it's there. This test asserts that, like, yeah, we're using that dot source operator. We'll know when we break it, and we have history demonstrating that, hey, we purposely chose it to be this way. Don't you change it, Andy. Talking to myself there. And the very last one I want to demonstrate is, I think the last time I got to demo that we had an end-to-end test for using editor services with Emacs in a third-party client. I've also added one for Vim. This was actually the one that came through as a user request. It was somebody using NeoVim, and let me get to the actual test there. I think it was Jim Truer the other day was like, hey, I use PowerShell and Vim. Like, oh, I can get that set up. I got it kind of set up, and then I decided, you know what, I can turn that into a full regression test. So we indeed have, like, for every PR, we test that Vim spins up with a Vim LSP client, can connect to editor services. Not only does it connect and run, but it does actually also test that diagnostics come through. So while setting this up is still like less than ideal, I mean, if you look at this code, that there's a lot of arguments you have to supply. We have the regressions and regression testing infrastructure in place for Vim and Emacs. So for those two clients, as well as a C# client, which is just our built-in end-to-end regression test, and the VS Code client as well. So we are now testing with 4 different clients against the PowerShell Editor Services server. This was really important because clients behave differently. Despite specs being specs, clients behave differently. So we have those tests. And now that we specifically have tests for these third-party clients, Vim and Emacs, we can go through and make this setup a lot easier. And that's kind of on our docket. I don't know if we're doing it in the next month or perhaps next semester, but one thing that's been important to me is to get this to be easy to set up, and then documents so you can take your favorite editor and with just a couple arguments, it's my goal, have PowerShell editor services lighting up your PowerShell documents regardless of the editor you're using. So this will get simpler. We just needed this in place first so we don't break it in that effort. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to demo there. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. So cool to see that issue with like the whole list of regression tests that we've been able to complete. I'll also note that if you are using editor services with something other than VS Code, very useful and interesting for us to get to hear about that. We don't have any sort of telemetry to pick things like that up. So kind of rely on users coming to us and telling us their scenarios. With that, I will pass things over to Anam, who's going to give some updates on the PowerShell Get project. Anam, are you there?
Maybe we can get back to her.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll
wait, there she is.
Oh,
No, maybe she may be having some issue with Teams.
I'll circle back.
No.
Okay.
If you're ready, we can hear and see you.
I am ready. I wasn't sure if it was like cutting my my
You look
video
good
or
now.
my
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'll go for it. Hey everyone, so we did a release or a preview release for PowerShell Get in late July. So 3.0 Preview 16 is released. And with that preview, we refactored the PS script file info commandlets. So new script file info, test script file info, and update script file info from v2 into v3. And then we also refactored update module manifest. So at this point, it is feature complete in terms of the commandlets from v2 being refactored for v3. We also added Authentico check for install PS resource, which was being done a little bit differently in v2, but is right now validating catalog files and sign files, and it is opt-in. In addition to that, we also started working on some bug fixes related to performance, and this next preview release will be focused primarily on performance. We have seen good feedback from community members who've been using our previous, or I guess the 3.0 Preview 16 pre-release. But please keep the feedback incoming. That's what's helping us the most. There was also, I just wanted to call out that the 3.0 Preview 16 release is not supported at the moment for PowerShell 7.0, 7.1, 7.2 preview 1, and that is due to a dependency issue that we are having. But that is something we definitely plan on resolving soon. It does work for Windows PowerShell 7.1, PowerShell 7.2, and then the 7.3 previews. And it's definitely something we're going to resolve soon. Yeah. And that is all I had. Feel free to, drop any questions in the chat or ask. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Anam. And just a reminder, as always, that you can track the progress of this project as well in our GitHub repo. We're very up to date using the GitHub projects with that project. So you can see exactly what we're working on and give us feedback as we continue to move towards an RC and eventual GA on this project.
Definitely.
With that, I will pass things over to Sarah. Sarah, if you're on the call, to give an update on your internship and your walkthrough.
Of course. Just to introduce myself again, I'm Sarah and I'm a product management intern this summer working with PowerShell. And we've been working on a VS Code walkthrough for beginner users. And it's kind of near completion, so I'm excited to show you this. Give me a second. So as you guys can see, we have a little demo, and here you can actually open a PowerShell walkthrough. So as you can see, it opens up all the steps that are available. And the first one is just choosing a version of PowerShell, and this kind of gives some clarification on PowerShell 5 and PowerShell 7. It also directs you to the open source part of PowerShell, and it takes you to the GitHub. So it also takes you to the link to install PowerShell. You also have the option to open a file or create a PowerShell file. As you can see, it just automatically opens a PS1 file, so you can just start scripting right away. And it also gives you a tip to use the keyboard controls if that's what you're more comfortable with. And we also have a great option to actually switch sessions. So this button will lead you to switching between 7 and 5. And it also directs you to the ability to pin 5 and 7 in the status bar. So that's really helpful for people who want to switch between two versions of PowerShell. And we know a lot of people like ISC mode, so we give that option to toggle it so you can go back and forth depending on which one you enjoy the most. And then followed by that, we can actually open the PowerShell terminal. So we know a lot of you either like it open or not. So with this option, you can toggle it open, keep it closed as well. And we also lead to more resources. So we have documentation linked, as well as links to the wonderful PowerShell community. And we also have a video tutorial coming up. And then lastly, we try to get a little more feedback from you guys on the confidence level. We really want this to support your PowerShell learning, especially for beginner users. And we know not all of these steps are comprehensive. So if someone wants to just kind of skip through a few of the steps, they have the option to just mark it done at the end and finish up. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who provided us feedback in the surveys in the past community calls. That played a big part in us designing the walkthrough. And I just want to thank Sarah also. She's wrapping up her internship tomorrow, but has been with our team for the last 12 weeks and done a really great job. I'm really excited to see this walkthrough fully come to life, and I'm sure it will live on well beyond your internship. So we do look forward to getting feedback on the walkthrough and what aspects of it are helpful or not helpful as we hopefully release it soon. And with that, we'll get updates from our other amazing intern, Abdullah.
Hello everyone, I'm going to give you a quick update on the archive module. Preview 1 was released a few weeks ago. It includes support for the rewritten compressor archive commandlet in C#. Preview 2 was released last week, and it had the rewritten compressor archive command, and the expand archive command is also rewritten in C#, as well as support for zip64. We also solved a number of bugs. There were bugs with should process and parameters such as verbose, what if, confirm. There are also bugs with like compressing empty directories and directories containing empty directories. So those bugs have been solved. Preview 3 is coming in the near future with tar support, tar.gz support, filtering support, and flattening support, and also support for path structure preservation. So please look forward to it. And I'm going to pass it back to Sydney.
Great. Yeah. And similarly, just want to give a huge shout out to Abdullah and all the work he's put in over the last 12 weeks for his internship, which is also wrapping up tomorrow. And also thank you so much to community members for providing really excellent feedback on the RFC that he wrote for the archive module. That played a big role in the design and development. But I'll pass things over to Steve, who's going to give an update on where the project goes from here.
Yes, thanks. So yeah, again, much thanks to both our interns, but they are finishing up, and hopefully they come back as employees in the future. But so one of the challenges we have is where Abdullah is leaving the project. First off, my plan is to have Patrick kind of pick it up and kind of finish it. However, he has other priorities right now, working on like editor service, VS Code, and PowerShell. So I want to set the expectation that don't expect regular previews or updates to the V2 module in the near future. All right. So I think with the feature set that we have, you can certainly use it. I would recommend that if you need to use archive in production, you probably should stick with V1 for now. But do continue to test it, give us feedback, and we will eventually complete the V2 rewrite. I don't want to set ET at this point in time.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And with that, I'll pass things over to Sean, who's going to give us a docs update.
Greetings, everyone. Let me share my screen here. Last month, we gave a preview of some docs that weren't quite published yet. Here under Optimizing Your Shell Experience, several new docs that talk about the features of using PowerShell in the shell, like tab completion and predictors. You can kind of think of this as the user documentation for PS Readline. We've got we have reference documentation, but this has been a piece that's been missing a little bit, talking about how to actually use these features. We have a couple more articles planned to go in here, but we really want to improve our documentation about the shell side of PowerShell. The next thing I want to talk about real quick is did an update to the docs page for the PowerShell extension for Visual Studio Code. If you've been coming out here seeing this documentation, it was very outdated. It was like 4 years old. No one was maintaining this. So This isn't in our normal location for docs, but this has been updated. We'll be keeping this up to date. Mostly this is about the features of the product and not so much about detailed usage. You can get that at the bottom here. There's links to our docs in the PowerShell doc set and some other resources here. I'll also add that as part of the PowerShell Get v3, I did a big update to the commandlet reference documentation. So in the next preview, the help for the existing commandlets should be a lot more comprehensive, and we'll be keeping that up to date throughout the previews of PowerShell Get. And then lastly, a big shout out here to my partner, Mikey Lombardi, for his hard work here in the DSC documentation for version 2. If you had been coming out here seeing this, there was no documentation, and now we've got some getting started, some conceptual documentation, some how-to guides, and we have also added reference content here for the PSDSC resources module, which is the replacement for the inbox DSC resources. And this is quite improved. This was a major uplift. There's I don't know, 84 different documents here when you count all of the resource module documentation. So lots of good content here for you DSC users. And again, look for more stuff to come in this area. We're working with the product team and the PMs to improve this DSC documentation. And with that, I'll hand it, I'll hand it off to Jason to talk about Get What's New.
Hey, thanks, Sean. And by the way, thank you both for that amazing update, especially the DSC update. Man, Mikey, that was a lot of work. So that's awesome. Hey, everyone, it's good to see you all. I spoke about this a little bit last month along with Sean. Just wanted to let you know that the commandlet Get What's New from the module What's New, guess what this commandlet does? It is out and available and has been released. So the Get What's New commandlet basically gives you, if you've been out to the website to our documentation and you've seen the web page What's New, that's what this commandlet provides for you locally, and also lets you set up a message of the day. Now, the interesting thing about this is we just released it and we've already updated it. That's because your feedback does actually matter. And so if you got some feedback for us, if you want to tell us some things about Get What's New that could make it a little bit more useful for you, well, come on out to our repo. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put in, well, looks like Sean's already putting stuff in. So, but hey, I had my buttons ready to go, Sean, so I'm sticking them in too. Come out to the GitHub repo and put in a suggestion, and we'll definitely take a look at it. Now, while you're out at the What's New repo and giving us a suggestion, hey, if there's other things you care about, maybe you care about secret management, maybe you care about crescendo or predictors, if you have suggestions for those, stop by those repos as well. We can certainly use the feedback. And to be honest with you, the reason the feedback's so important is because it really matters and we make changes based upon it. So check out Get What's New and let us know what you think. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Sydney.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And of course, thank you so much, Sean and Mikey, as well, for all of the amazing docs work that makes such a big impact. I'll just plug a reminder again that folks can use the chat if any questions are coming up at all throughout any of these topics. And I will pass things over to Mike to give us some community updates.
Hey, everyone. I assume you can hear me, so I'm just going to keep on going here. So I'm going to start off with a quickie linked up of stuff I'm going to talk about. That way I don't have to worry about sharing them later. And so lots of stuff to talk about in the community today. I heard a phrase earlier today on another phone call that I really loved. celebrate the community. And so I'd like to celebrate the community a little bit today. We talk about things we have coming up, things that have recently passed, and also highlight some things in the community you may not have seen yet. And so with that, let's get right into it. So the first link that I have on the list here is for the Automation Summit that's going to be coming up in December. That is run by my colleague James Petty and the DevOps Collective organization. That is the organization that produces the PowerShell.org PowerShell Summit. If you're familiar with the PowerShell Summit, the Automation Summit is very similar. It's just a different focus. So it'll be December 8th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in Nashville. It's a 3-day event. There'll be 40 plus sessions. It's about a $1,500 ticket. And so if you're wondering if the Automation Summit is for you, I'm just going to throw out some buzzwords. And if these buzzwords ring with you, then you probably should consider coming to this event. And so those buzzwords are things like infrastructure as code, CI/CD, cross-platform, configuration management, if you're working in DevOps or you're thinking cloud first or you're thinking multi-cloud, or if you deal in containers, those are all the types of things that will be prominent at the Automation Summit. And so they'll sort of be, PowerShell will be not the focus of the Automation Summit, but a partner in the summit. And I believe the PowerShell folks will be there in attendance as well. And so the link is on the chat if you'd like to visit. Topics have already been submitted. They're about to approve topics with speakers. So we'll have a speaker list and topic list shortly, but it should be a great event. And so that's coming up in December. And so along with that, PSConf for You just recently finished, and those videos are available. I put that link on the chat as well. It's in YouTube. They've shared all the videos from the conference. Go out and check them out. There's lots of great content out there to pick through. And so I also wanted to celebrate our European members as well. And so one of the things that I've noticed in the community is in the user group space, more user groups are starting to meet in person, and that's something that I love. And so I wanted to point out that PowerShell Southampton group is going to be meeting on September 5th in an in-person meeting. They have, the link is on the chat. I saw the speaker list. It's a pretty great speaker list for a user group event. And so if you happen to be in that area of the world, consider coming out and support them. And with that, I also want to add user groups in general. I know of about 4 or 5 groups that are starting to meet in person, and you may not be aware of that. And so I just mentioned the Southampton group. Coming back to the United States, there's the Gainesville, Florida group, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my group in Raleigh. We all are meeting in person now, and we would love for you to come out and join us if possible. And so listen, as a user group organizer, nobody loves to come to a meeting that has 2 attendees, not the user group organizer, not the presenter, and certainly not the attendees. And so if you're in those areas, I know that many of these groups like my own still offer a remote option. However, we really would like to see some people come and join us in person. It's a lot of fun. My group, we feed you, we have lots of jokes, and we have some fun. And so it's a really great way to meet people, make connections in the community, and learn some great stuff. So if you can, support your local user groups, come out and join us in person. And if you're trying to figure out a way to keep up on all this stuff rather than listen to me, the PowerShell community, PowerShell.org has a calendar that you can use. It's PowerShell.org/calendar. And so we parse RSS feeds from various user groups, usually from meetup.com, and we display those events on one easy to read calendar. If you go there today, it's not working. It's a plugin for WordPress, and it's not the most reliable plugin. So James and I are going to work on improving that. Maybe we'll move it to something better, but we want to have a calendar that people can go to find out what's going on in the community. And then hopefully, if that calendar is reliable, I'd like to develop a module that you can just call from PowerShell that reads that calendar, and you can just get it in your command line. So there's some stuff on the horizon there. And so with that, one of the other things that I wanted to do with this time that is afforded to me is to find ways to engage with the community and highlight things in the community that you might not be aware of. And so, you know, when we come on this call, the PowerShell team really highlights the latest and the greatest. But we have this thing called the PowerShell Gallery that's got hundreds of modules out there of work that people have already done. And the thing is that it's not so easy to find stuff that's already in the community that might be awesome. And so with that, I thought during this time, from time to time, we could highlight a module that might be useful to you that you may not be aware of. And so I'm going to add a little caveat on here. This time that I'm sharing with you guys is still a work in progress. And if you have an idea of what you'd like me to present, I'm certainly open to that. So if you have ideas, please throw them in the chat or reach out to me and we can work on that. But today, if I still have time, I have 2 quick demos I want to do. They'll probably be no more than 5 minutes each. And so let me share my screen here. No, that is the wrong screen. So let's try this again. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is a module called WebGeo. And so WebGeo is a module that I've recently used that probably a lot of people don't know about it. And this module needs a giant caveat before I get started. There is at least 5 other modules in the community that do the same thing as this, but more. And like PowerShell Universal, Automator, Runway, Script Runner, System Frontier. And I want to make sure that those community members get their due respect. Those are fantastic modules. Those are professionally built modules by community members that write code at a very high level and have support offerings with those modules as well. And so if you need more than what WebGeo does, certainly look at those modules and those tools. They're fantastic. But if you're looking for a simple way to make a self-service portal in your company, WebGeo does one thing and it does it really well. And that's what I wanted to show you today. And so keep in mind that my demos today are not really to show code, but really to give you an idea of the possibilities. And so what WebGeo is a module, PowerShell module that you can download and run. It's built on top of DSC. And so that's very timely today. And so the way it works is after you download the module, you have a config file. And so this is what's required to config WebGeo. And I'll try to explain this as simple as possible. Essentially here, we're pointing out a bunch of directories and IIS settings that we want to put in place. And we need to come up with things like a name and a certificate. And so nothing too challenging. And if you have some familiarity with IIS, this will be very easy for you. But essentially, you fill out this config file here, and then you invoke the module. And what WebGeo does for you is it uses DSC to provision IIS on a box for you. And so you don't have to worry about building IIS. You don't have to know IIS configs. When it's done, you have a working website. And that working website does one thing, which displays PowerShell code and turns it into a web page that's interactive for users. And so if you are familiar with IIS, you may want to configure integrated auth or use a certificate or change the services. But essentially, the default build gives you a web server. And so that web server is what you're seeing on this screen here. And this web server this is the default view. I left this in here just so people can see what you see by default. This is a whole bunch of examples that the module creator, Mark Domansky, has included to give you some ideas of what you can do. What you would normally do is get rid of this crap and replace it with a welcome page for your users. And so on the left-hand side here, we have some scripts that I've built. And these scripts are nothing fancy. I work mostly in directory services. So here's a script here called Get Employee Info that has one parameter. And so I'm going to back up for a second here. If we go and look at the code, this is just a simple script that has one parameter and just takes some input from AD and builds out a table. And so what happens is when you put this script into your scripts directory and configure a JSON that says go look at that file, it reads the file and it parses the inputs and creates a web page that becomes an input. And so now I can come here and I can put in a username and it'll go and query AD and return a bunch of information. And so while this may not be like super cutting edge, let's think about this for a second. I know PowerShell, and most of the people on this call hopefully know PowerShell. But your users may not know PowerShell. Your users may not know how to configure an environment. Your users don't know script and execution policies. Your users don't know how to install modules. And so you can send them to a web page. You can configure your scripts. They don't have to know anything about PowerShell, and they can just get some data back, whether it be reports, or you can use it to create things, all kinds of things you can do. Essentially, if you can come up with a script and you have some inputs, WebGeo will read that and turn it into a web page that you can then use as a self-service portal. And so you can do lots of different things. Here's a script that I made that generates some random passwords. And so when I do this, it just behind the scenes doesn't do anything fancy. It comes up with some passwords. So if I change this to 7 and 20, I'll get just a random thing here. So the point is, if you need a really simple way to create a self-service portal in your organization, or if you want to create a portal that you have some power users that want to use PowerShell, but you don't want to have them working in the console and they want a GUI interface, this makes an awesome alternative. And so if you're interested in that, the module is called WebGia. I put the link to the Git repo, and Mark has been around in the community for about 5 years. This module is not incredibly new, but Mark updates it all the time. And it's been incredibly useful for me and many of my colleagues in the industry who are running this in corporate organizations and have a quick and easy portal that impresses people very easily. And so the other thing that I wanted to demo today, and which is really simple, is something that I think Jason may enjoy seeing. And so last week on Twitter, I noticed a gentleman named Adam Bacon. I don't know if he's on the call today. I don't think he is. But Adam has been tweeting a lot lately. Adam writes a lot of code. He's a PowerShell developer. And I went to his GitHub, and he has about 86 repos. And so he's a busy guy. And so last week he tweeted out something about a module he made. And so what I'm talking about is we probably all have remembered the days of using tools to migrate files from one server to another. And there's one tool in general that does that really well, and that's Robocopy. And so if you're familiar with Robocopy, I think everybody knows this tool, and everybody probably has stories of admin days in the past, migrating file servers in the middle of the night or over weeks, keeping them up to date, and then doing a live cutover. And Robocopy is fantastic for that. However, Robocopy has one problem, and that is that Robocopy has about 1,000 switches. And of course, I'm being a little bit overdramatic with that. But if you were to run Robocopy and run the help file, you will see that there is quite a bit of switches here that you can choose. And they don't really make a whole lot of sense if you're not familiar with Robocopy. And so everybody's kind of got their favorites, but there's two things that generally run true with Robocopy. People use it to migrate files, and people don't remember the switches, so they all have a cheat sheet on what to do. And so in this case, one of the most common ones is copy all, right? And so that's easy. But if you want to start doing some more advanced stuff, you might want to do retries, and you might want to do wait, and you might want to do multi-threaded, and that's all great. But wouldn't it be great if you can do that in PowerShell? And so that's what Adam Bacon has done. And so Jason, the reason I called you out on this is because what Adam has done has used Crescendo. What did I do here? I put that in the wrong spot, to make a wrapper for Robocopy and make his own module. So there are other modules that have done similar things, but this is the only one that I know of that uses Crescendo. And so what happens is, up here in this example, you need to know switch names, right? And you need, maybe R and W are obvious, but XDL might not be. So now with Adam's module, we can do simple stuff like source path and destination path. And we have some nice parameter lists that we can see here. And I want to see wait. Oh, it's wait time and retry. And so there's number of retries. And so there's lots of stuff that he's built into this. There's not a lot to it, but it makes a tool that's great better. And so I thought people might be interested in that. Unfortunately, Adam has not shared the repo yet. I haven't found it on his GitHub profile, so I'm guessing he's still got it marked as private, but it is available on the PowerShell gallery. I think I have it open here. It's called Robocopy, and he chose a Robocop icon for that. And it's just a simple install, and you're off and running. And it's been pretty cool from what I've been playing with it. So just wanted to point that out. That is everything I wanted to cover today. I hope you guys found this information useful. I will see you next month. And if you have questions, please reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. So cool to see so many events coming back in person and so many user group events, and also really awesome to see those demos and see some of the cool stuff that's available in the gallery. I saw two hands come up. The first one I saw come up was Jason. if you had something to say. And
Yeah, I
Hey,
just wanted to
Jason.
dive in and Mike say, thanks for showing that module. And I think now we have like 13 Crescendo modules out on the gallery, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with Adam Bacon. Somebody's got to call Joey and tell him finally his dream has come true.
You can tweet at him. Maybe he'll respond.
Okay.
What was the other question we had out there? I see a hand up, but I'm not sure who it is.
Guido.
Hey, Guido, how can I help you? Uh-oh.
Hey, sorry, I think I pressed the wrong keyboard shortcut. I'm multitasking.
He probably just wanted to tell me how awesome my demos were. That's all. Thank you.
Oh, they were
awesome.
indeed.
And so, guys and girls, I really want to make sure that we use this time effectively. So if this is not the kind of stuff that you want to see, or you want to see something else, I would love feedback. I know Jason would love feedback. The whole goal of me coming to talk about this was to find ways to bring the community into the Microsoft community call. I might not have the best ideas of what you want to see, and we're certainly open to feedback.
awesome. And I see a question here from Phil asking if there are any easy ways to see what module in the gallery is Crescendo based.
Yep, as a matter of fact, I'm typing it in. You can do find dash module with a tag of Crescendo built.
And so I did not know that that was an actual thing. I was going to point out that I saw that tag on Adam Bacon's repo, and I didn't understand what it was for. So that's cool to know that.
Crescendo actually adds it.
Crescendo actually adds that tag into constructed modules.
Cool.
Very smart. Alrighty, I will pause here and see if anyone wants to raise their hand for a question or has any additional questions in the chat. Looks like we have a hand up. Was that on purpose this time?
Yeah, no, it's on purpose.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so I was attempting to do some DSC work on Linux, which in turn evolved into Get configuration for the Azure guest agent. And for the Linux modules, we really have to rewrite all of those NX modules for the most basic stuff, right? I'm doing like a whole bunch of research for the past 2 days or so. I'm trying to Frankenstein some DSC classes to create the package, but that would be the only solution for the time being, right? That's being developed by the I think now it's a machine configuration product team, right?
Michael, I think I saw you on the call. You might be the best person to take this one.
Yeah, you've got the right idea. I mean, classes is so for right now, machine config does support script based for Windows and then classes only for Linux. We are definitely investigating if we can find a way to keep support for script based for Windows, but we haven't nailed down a process yet. So the safest way, and I would actually argue the most sophisticated way is to continue using classes.
And that would be PowerShell classes, right? If I have like a composite resource that like a PowerShell class that calls a .NET library, that wouldn't be supported, would it?
What do you think, Steve?
What was the question of using a PowerShell classic called .NET API? That's certainly supported if that's the question.
For DSC resources?
There shouldn't be any problem with doing that at all.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Gail, I see that you got asked a question and turned your camera on. Were you wanting to answer that one?
No, let's just say, Guido, if you want, we can take this offline and we can discuss. And Michael, you probably don't know because I talked to Nitin today, but there's a PR for NX tools. So awesome. Yeah, Guido, we need to talk maybe so then you don't duplicate the work that already exists.
Oh yeah, I've already branched the NX tools, and it's just local, but I'll create a fork and submit the PR when it's done.
Yeah, so there was an issue recently with .NET that had a breaking change. So when you have invariant culture mode enabled, which the machine config agent has, there's a big issue with import localized data. So that was one of the big issue at the moment with the NX Tools module, which is the PR we're talking about. So I won't go into the details right now, but I fixed it. I think I finished fixing it today, so that's why.
Well, I'm basically trying to recreate the Linux baseline policy, but with the remediation, not just audit.
We can take it offline. Drop me a DM on Twitter.
Let me just add real quick. I think the timing of that is actually really good because I don't know if everyone saw, but .NET 6 is now shipping with Ubuntu in their repos, and that is by default invariant, meaning there's because all the languages is big. So this will enable that to work.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. We'll pause again and see if there are any last questions before we wrap up today's call.
So for waiting, let me just add something real quick about something that Jason highlighted earlier. Just wanted to touch again on getting community feedback is so important. I think last month, I think Michael, noted that we had an issue that we want to talk about whether it makes sense to include secret management and secret store as part of PowerShell 7. And we got some great community feedback, specifically talking about some reasons why we wouldn't want to do that. And the community did discuss it yesterday, I think, or maybe the last week. I don't remember exactly when, but and we agree. I think that feedback is definitely very valid, and we've now moved away from that idea. We're moving towards some other ideas on how we can make it easier for community members to discover sets of modules. But maybe we'll have an issue or discussion open for that in the future. But it's a good example where the community feedback really helped us because we don't know everything. And you guys really provide a lot of context and scenarios where some of the hypothetical stuff we think it didn't make sense.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and definitely agree that the value of community feedback is so important. I just saw another question come in, so just reading that one. The question is, any exploration going on around authentication with PS remoting from domain joined to pure AADJ endpoints without reliance on passing local account credentials? Steve, do you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, you caught me in the middle of responding to something.
Oh.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. It says any exploration going on around authentication with PS remoting from domain joined to pure AADJ endpoints without reliance on passing local account credentials.
Oh, not at this time. There is, let's see, how do I want to say this? We are working with the identity team on some scenarios with AAD and SSH, which would flow it back into PowerShell remoting via SSH, but nothing to announce at this time.
Okay, great. And then one other question for you came in the chat too.
Sure.
Which is, can you sum up why you ended up there? And I think this is in reference to mentioning
secret management.
Secret management, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we didn't consider, I think from our context is I'll put it this way as a short version, is the benefit of having modules as part of PowerShell 7 is that users and other module authors can expect it to be there. So it's just part of the platform, right? That was the original motivation, saying, hey, we still see people, embedding secrets into their scripts, whatever. That's certainly bad practice. So if we had this, then people would start depending on it, and people could also depend on it via modules and have that as a built-in capability. But then basically the feedback, and it made us reflect upon, when we ship, for example, Pester in Windows, right? I think that was the right decision at that time, where it really enabled the community to really embrace testing with PowerShell. Even if you're not using PowerShell itself, you can use PowerShell script as a way to test some other application using Pester. But the big challenge we had there is now that it's shipped in Windows version 3.4, I think, we have a really hard time removing it because everyone's dependent on that specific version. And Pester itself has moved on to V5, right? And the later major versions were breaking changes. So it's not like we can simply just take the latest version and ship that back into Windows. So we don't want to introduce that type of problem again with PowerShell 7, where we ship a certain version and people stay on that version for a long time and we can't move forward, right? So instead, it makes sense to kind of figure out why or how to make it easier for PowerShell users to embrace updates via the gallery. And there are also legit scenarios where, maybe you're air gapped or maybe you're in some kind of a sovereign cloud where you can't get to the gallery. So we gotta think about how to solve some of those problems over the long term as well. So
Awesome. Appreciate that answer. And I haven't seen any more questions come into the chat from there. So we can go ahead and wrap up today's call. Thank you so much for joining and look forward to seeing you next month for our September call. As a reminder, we're always looking for community agenda items and topics and demos. So please do let us know if you have anything you'd like to show off. Thank you again for joining today, and we'll see you next month.